My name is Patrick Craig. I'm the Public Programs Coordinator here at the National Building Museum, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the museum and to this afternoon's program. Today is the sixth of the Community in the Aftermath lecture series. This series is sponsored by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and the Federal Emergency Management Agency in partnership with the museum. And we are truly grateful for their support, and to Dana Bress, who will take the podium after I do, who is a research engineer with HUD, for helping us coordinate this series. I couldn't do it without him, so thank you, Dana. So as you may or may not know, the focus of this series is the Federal Emergency Management Agency's Alternative Housing Pilot Program, which is a grant program to develop a more viable, versatile, and readily available, cost-effective post-disaster housing. Today's speakers are, we have kind of sort of two focuses today. It's a little interesting, different tack than what we've taken before, and Dana's going to provide a little bit more context, but I can tell you we're looking at the Joint Housing Solutions Group, which is an organization within FEMA that evaluates vendors of post-disaster housing. So we'll hear from them, as well as we'll hear from the New York City Office of Emergency Management as they look at ways to provide post-disaster housing in dense urban environments. So really looking forward to that. So this is the second to last program in this series, so I encourage you all to come out. We are in the process of planning our last program for spring of 2011, and right now we're looking at that to be a wrap-up of sort of lessons learned from the other areas that we've covered in this series and the way forward. So that should be a really interesting program. And as always, if you missed previous programs in this series, you can, transcripts and audio are available on our website, which is www.nbm.org. So with that, I'm going to welcome Dana Bress to the podium, who's going to provide some context for today's program and tell a little bit more about the speakers we'll be hearing from. Dana?
Thank you, Patrick. Again, thank you for attending this presentation of Community in the Aftermath. We envisioned this to highlight the progress and the results of the Alternative Housing Pilot Program. It was a FEMA initiative to test better strategies for communities to rebuild housing in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. So in the past, we've taken a look and heard from the states of Louisiana and Mississippi, and then the community of Biola Battery, Alabama, in how the approaches that they used. And every one of them, there's something to learn from. Both, there's things that they, that we say, this, we can use this somewhere else tomorrow. And other things that this was a little harder to implement than we thought, and maybe we want to make sure that we focus our effort there. So obviously the focus of post-disaster housing has to be much broader than just the Alternative Housing Pilot Program. There is really no pixie dust kind of solution. There's no single solution that, to the myriad questions that we face. And to that end, today's presentation highlights a few of those. FEMA, obviously, the nation's leader in disaster response and disaster housing, has a number of irons in the fire. And Steve Miller and Joel Pirrone today will discuss some of them. Steve runs the Direct Housing Assistance Mission for FEMA and is responsible for a number of areas that he'll talk about. And Joel Pirrone and David Leday are working on the Joint Housing Solutions Group, which is an effort to look for housing approaches that might not have hit the mainstream, but may present tremendous promise for disaster in for housing in a post-disaster environment. Following along that theme, the what's new and unique and how can we make it work, we have we can offer today a discussion of the unique situation of New York City. Because of New York and the vision of the New York City Office of Emergency Management, Cynthia Barton from New York City OEM and Matt Charney and Karen Kuby from the Homeland Security Regional Catastrophic Preparedness Grant Program will discuss how they're working to address the needs for post-disaster housing in a dense urban environment. Obviously, the same challenges that we see every place else: quality housing, affordable housing, safe, accepted. But, oh, by the way, we need to fit it into a relatively narrow space, relatively small spaces, and we have a lot of folks we need to house. So they have a number of big challenges. The point here, the takeaway point here is that there can't be a one-size-fits-all solution. There's not a single kind of disaster housing that will work everywhere. And so what you'll hear today is an acknowledgement of that reality and kind of opening up the other facets of disaster housing. So with that, I'd like to introduce Steve Miller from FEMA.
Thank you. Thank you all. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. As we all know, that housing survivors in the aftermath of a disaster is always challenging, and to understand why we're looking at alternative units, it's something that we need to know is, what does FEMA traditionally do to do housing? Immediately after disaster, we go into sheltering, which is for emergency assistance, preserving life and preserving property as well. And to begin the next step of the process, though, which is the recovery process, the goal to allow survivors to move back into their communities so the communities can be that recovery process, really is where our disaster housing picks up from a standpoint of housing the individuals. Now, understanding FEMA's approaches to interim housing or temporary disaster housing certainly follows the line of our sequence of deliveries. Initially, we start with the financial side of the house. We look for rental resources in the available areas. We provide rental assistance to folks. We also provide repair funds as well as replacement funds for dwellings. But when the available resources in an area are unavailable or infeasible for some reason, then FEMA's interim housing or direct housing mission is put into effect. And traditionally what we use, everybody knows, is the mobile homes, park models, and the infamous travel trailers from Katrina. These past several years, past decades, the experiences that we have certainly exposed weaknesses in our traditional housing capabilities, and essentially, especially in the events of a catastrophic occurrence, such as even in Florida, the 4 hurricanes in Florida, and certainly in the Katrina Rita environment. And what we're trying to do to address that is we're working with our partners to incorporate lessons learned, beginning to do the challenges with the AHPP. We're evaluating opportunities out there, solutions that we have not looked at in the past. We're looking at innovative new methods and partnerships to enable us to improve how we do business. Specifically preparing for those environments, such as the urban environments, some OCONUS environments, extreme conditions, insular areas, and even to support a large catastrophic requirement. We understand that very much so that there are weaknesses in what we do and that we need to look at additional options to support what we do. So what we've done is we have begun the alternative housing pilot programs. We've done the Joint Housing Solutions Group, and we've also incorporated the National Disaster Housing Task Force as a result of Katrina, to which are actually 3 main focuses that we're putting forward in developing these alternative housing options out there. The National Disaster Housing Task Force, which is a interagency working group, and it's composed of federal agency partners. There's multitudes of them, including HUD, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Justice, Department of the Interior, just to name a few. And what they're doing is it's providing a full-time multi-agency focus on disaster housing related issues. And they're working on developing some documents and online resources that will be available for the local communities and the states and local communities in the event of a disaster, even one that they don't have, that's not a presidentially declared. Next, of course, is you've already probably know about is the alternative housing program, pilot program, the grant program outside of FEMA's normal grant processes that addresses the housing in the 4 Katrina-related states, Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, and Louisiana. Excuse me. And they are currently evaluating the units that they have out there. They will be able to answer some questions as far as the status of them if you have afterwards, any questions afterwards. And then, of course, we have the Joint Housing Solutions Group, which is our internal research and development group, and who have been working as we put into place to evaluate the alternatives out there, reaching out to the commercial markets, even reaching out further than the commercial markets, just having new products that they evaluate. We've done selections. We've established of course, I don't want to take Joel's thunder away here, but we've established actually laboratories up at the Emergency Management Institute in Emmitsburg, which he will discuss here further. But we do take it seriously. We understand that this is something that we need to address. Part of our catastrophic planning is to have all of the additional tools in the box that we may need to help support bring these communities back to their original state as quickly as possible. With that being said, I want to introduce Joel Pirrone. And as well, like I said, is that we do have representatives from National Disaster Housing Task Force and the Alternative Housing Pilot Program. If you have questions after this, they'll be glad to answer them.